Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much. This is High Tech High Unboxed. I'm Alec Patton, and we are coming to you live from the National Summit on Improvement in Education and the Deeper Learning Conference in San Diego, California. The name of this session is Deeper Learning or Continuous Improvement. Why not both? So that's what we're going to be getting into. Here's how it's going to go. We're all going to talk to each other for a bit, and then we'll open it up to your questions. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists. Ben Daley started at High Tech High as a physics teacher in 2000, which makes him a founding teacher. He's been a basketball coach, a school director, chief operating officer, and chief academic officer for High Tech High, and is now the president of the High Tech High Graduate School of Education. Give it up for Ben. Next, we have Jim May. Jim began his career as a high school social studies teacher and soccer coach in South Carolina. He was also a founding staff member at Two Rivers Public Charter School in Washington, D.C. In 2011, Jim joined New Tech Network as school development coach. In 2022, he became co-leader, and he is now the president and CEO of New Tech Network. Give it up for Jim. Now, Ash Vasudeva began his career as a science teacher at Pasadena High School. Since then, he's been a senior program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, co-executive director of Stanford University's School Redesign Network, senior VP at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, president and CEO of ConnectEd, the National Center for College and Career, and he is now the education program director at the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Let's hear it for Ash. Now, if you were listening closely, something you might have noticed is that all three of these gentlemen began their careers as high school teachers. So I want to start by taking you all back to your roots. Tell me about a moment that stayed with you, either as a moment when you saw deeper learning happening or a moment when you realized that deeper learning was missing. Ben, let's start with you.
So I was thinking about the first moment that came to mind when Alec asked that question a couple hours ago was, well, actually, I want to go back. So as an undergrad, I read Horace's School by Ted Sizer. And I always feel like you tell you're getting old when no one knows who your heroes are anymore. But for a few folks, Ted Sizer was, very meaningful for me personally. And so that kind of set me on a journey of thinking about what should high schools actually be about? And then I became a teacher. I was coaching basketball, I was teaching AP physics, and I was teaching a kind of regular physics class. And one thing that really struck me was, as a basketball coach, it was me and the kids preparing for we were together against the other team. And in my AP class, although I was not a big fan of AP as a construct, it was me and my students getting ready for the exam. We were on the same side together, and it felt kind of like being a basketball coach. But then in my regular physics class, I was the one making the test at the end, and it was me against the kids. And there was this whole dynamic of what's going to be on the test, Mr. Daley? And there was this whole weird thing that was going on. We were kind of playing school together because it was like a different dynamic than coaching or teaching AP. And so there was something there for me early on about what's going on here? And I think the work that we're trying to do to have kids exhibit their work publicly, it's like me and the kids getting ready for this event together. So that was something I thought about.
Awesome. And Jim, we'll go over to you next.
So the first example that came to mind was I didn't get connected into this universe of ideas probably until what you heard Alec mention around the founding of Two Rivers Public Charter School, which was in 2004. The second school I taught at was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was a school called Carolina Forest High School in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. I was the youngest teacher in the social studies faculty, and so I got the economics class that nobody wanted to teach for seniors. And one student in that class over the course of the semester, we had this sort of slow burn of a conversation taking shape about economics and economic ideas, where he would stay late and ask some questions about something we talked about. And the next class we had, he would stay a little bit later still and had a few more questions. And this culminated in him at one point in the semester bringing me in a CD-ROM. You heard Kwaku make a joke earlier about, like, if you don't know what a record is. He brought in a CD, and which I popped into my computer, and he had built a program that could calculate the Gini index of any economy just with a few data points. The Gini index, if you don't know, is a measure of the distribution of wealth in an economy. Essentially, it's a proxy for how big of an equity issue you have in an economic system. So this was a kid who, this, by the way, was not the AP class. This was just literally the economics section that nobody wanted to teach. And this was a kid who was deeply immersed in becoming himself and understanding something he was interested in and working with really complex ideas through the process of learning. The term deeper learning didn't exist at that time. That was 1998. But that was my first, I think, real interaction with watching a young person engaged in that process.
Did you stay in touch with that kid?
I did for a while. I've lost touch with him now.
Got it.
First of all, thank you, Alec, for moderating the session. Thank you, Ben, for the invitation. Thank you, Jim, for your partnership in having this conversation. As you said at the beginning, Alec, I taught science at Pasadena High School, and it was chemistry, biology, and environmental science. And the two things that stick out to me most was starting a garden for the school, where all of our kids, whether they were in biology and environmental science in particular, could get connected to these principles in practice and see how things worked in real life. So when you're thinking about the carbon cycle, it feels difficult and abstract. But when you take the carbon cycle and connect it to real-world processes, what's abstract and theoretical becomes practical and applied. And I think of most of school as a tension between those two things. And most of school is abstract and theoretical to most kids. And those kids will thrive in those environments, but without attention to the practical and applied, we're going to lose kids. And I think deeper learning has a great connection to both.
Oh, thank you all so much. Now, we're talking about two, as you say, kind of abstract concepts, deeper learning and continuous improvement. So I asked about this when we were chatting earlier, and Jim, you said you'd step up for this. What is deeper learning?
Did I say that?
You did say that. You did say that, and Ben was there.
Yeah, so deeper learning. I'll try to pull on two threads or ways of operationalizing deeper learning just to get a fuller picture, I think, of what the people in this community are after or reaching for when we talk about deeper learning. So there's, of course, the education program from Hewlett that helped identify and articulate the deeper learning competencies, which you see in your journals, and which point at right skill and competency. They're the outcomes piece. They come out of a thread that, quite frankly, is largely rooted in economic thinking, right, about the 21st century skills movement and what you're going to need to be viable in an emerging economy, or at least what we thought it was going to be at that time. But they also point at something larger, right? This idea of like agency and adaptability and people who are capable and relational, right? Point at a bigger picture of human flourishing than just economic success. And then our friends Jal and Sarah, who are here this week, in their book, In Search of Deeper Learning, talk about deeper learning, and in particular, powerful learning experiences, right? Living at the intersection of mastery, identity, and creativity. So they pull in for us like the experience, they give us almost like a phenomenology of learning, of what it means to be immersed in becoming yourself and discovering yourself through the process of learning. And so those two pieces together, I think, get us the richest picture of what we're reaching for when we use the phrase deeper learning.
Anyone have anything to add to that? Or
Well, I was thinking about Billy. Billy came to High Tech High. Our first year, we had 150 ninth graders. Billy was one of those students. And Billy is not his real name, by the way, because there actually was a Billy. I'm thinking, as I said that, I'm different Billy.
not Billy, to be clear.
Different
not Billy.
Yeah, just for those in the room who might remember the real Billy. Billy was 14 years old, and he'd been failing all his classes. And he'd been in a special day class, so a separate pull-out classroom, because people felt he could not succeed in a traditional classroom. And in those days, your cumulative file would get literally mailed to you months after the kid had enrolled in the school. So we didn't even know that his background as he entered our school. And this would have been our practice anyway. So we put him directly into the regular class with everybody else. And he immediately started succeeding. Freshman year, he built this chess-playing robot, or at least didn't really play chess, but it was like this little arm that could move the chess pieces. So it kind of had the mechanical side. His senior year, he made this remote-controlled toy for children. He went to Stanford, got an engineering degree. He went to work for this startup toy company, started his own business, and now he's an engineer and a test pilot for this electric aviation company that partners with NASA. And I saw his older brother at Trader Joe's a couple months ago, and I was asking him about how Billy was doing, and he said, "Oh, High Tech High saved his life." Now, the thing about High Tech High is every single kid who comes to us was in a special day classroom, and then they all go to Stanford. So it's really quite a remarkable institution.
Since this is going to be a podcast, I just want to fact check that. That is not true.
I have a lot to say about that comment. And so, at our best, though, this is what we're really after, I think, is giving kids a chance to explore their passion, bring their passion, make something, build something, do something like Ash was talking about, and then kids can thrive in ways that you might not success. So that's another version I would take of what deeper learning is about and what we're after, all of us.
Yeah, I want to just build on that, Ben, because Billy, I think, personifies what parents, communities, or teachers, leaders of all stripes aspire for children in their communities. And you see this trend in portraits of a graduate and graduate profiles. When you paint that picture of what we're trying to achieve as an aim for K-12 education, it isn't reduced to an SAT score or ACT score. It isn't reduced to the number of credits and the number of courses. It's a much broader picture of young people ready to succeed in their civic life, in their professional life, their work life, their family life, and other domains. And the deeper learning skills are what get captured, those competencies, in those portraits of a graduate. So it is a destination, and people who are lucky enough, like Billy, to find their way into High Tech High and other great schools can get there, but we need to do more of it for more kids.
Yeah, and thank you. And I'll just add, there's a thing, kind of I don't know what you call it, like a workshop activity that I actually did for the first time when I was facilitated by High Tech High teachers, but when I was living in England, the significant learning experience. And that's, I don't know if people in this room have done this, but you think about and you identify an experience, a moment of significant learning from your own life, from basically when you were a K-12 student, when you were under 18 pretty much, but not necessarily one that happened in school. And you surface, well, what were the things about that made that significant? And people usually understand pretty quickly. They can come up with, and you could come up with for yourselves, if you haven't done this, an experience of significant learning in your own life. And it often is something that, different stuff comes up about, you were really challenged. You were doing something that was meaningful beyond yourself, that there were significant stakes, but and it pushed you, but it was achievable. You had an adult you had a powerful relationship with. Often being outdoors comes up. And often it's something that didn't happen in your core classes. Sometimes it is, but often it's something that happened in an after-school program, in a sport, like we mentioned earlier. And so I think there's a lot of work that has been done and still to be done about, well, what is deeper learning? What are the competencies? What are we really going for? But there's also a level of you just get it. You know when it happened for you, and you know when it wasn't happening for you.
I want to jump in on that because having asked hundreds, if not thousands of people that question, I can tell you that no one person has ever said doing 1 through 19 odd.
Think about that one just now. Everyone, I assume we're familiar with the experience of doing 1 for 19 through 19.
I like when Alec explains my jokes for me. Thank you.
That's why, I don't want anyone to be left out.
Yeah.
Over to Ben for what is continuous improvement.
I threw you off your game there, Alec. Okay, well, what is continuous? What is deeper learning? This is like a simple question that's like a perplexingly difficult question to answer. What I'm thinking about is these questions that the authors Langley and colleagues write about, which are these 3 improvement questions, which is what is your goal? And by what is your goal, we mean how much by when, a clear amount by a certain date. Don Berwick says soon is not a number, some is not a number, soon is not a time. So what is your goal? What are you going to change? And then how will you know that change is an improvement? And I really appreciate these questions so much because they're sort of like no duh when you say them. And so in a way, it's almost like, why do we need this continuous improvement thing? Because it's so no duh. So I was thinking to myself, why do we need these questions? And what's the alternative to setting a goal and changing something and trying to figure out if the change was an improvement? So I want to tell the story about maybe 15 years ago, we were having a challenge. Maybe we're still having this challenge. We were having a challenge, and we're still having a challenge of math. And we had math teachers saying, I don't know what math content I'm supposed to be teaching. And so we tried various strategies around this. And at one point, one of our teachers said, I'm going to write a book. I'd like to write a math textbook over the summer for High Tech High for 10th grade. I said, that sounds amazing. I'll pay you extra time to do this. And so she wrote this book. And then I'm in a meeting in March, and teachers are saying the same thing they're always saying. I don't know what math I'm supposed to teach. It's so confusing. Why don't we have... And I'm like, what's wrong with us? I'm like, wait, we wrote a whole textbook. What about... And there's a textbook? I'd never heard about this textbook. I'm like, gosh, I'm such a moron. We made a textbook. We didn't even tell any of the teachers. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. We do have this textbook. And then after the meeting ended, I was like, wait a second. I look back in my calendar, and in fact, we had met in August. We had shared the textbook. We had done stuff together. And yet no one even remembered in March that we had done this. And so Joe McCannon at the Billions Institute has this expression, it's not a website. And what he means is he works with people who are trying to effect change, and they think, I'm going to make a website, or I'm going to make a book, I'm going to make a textbook. And Joe says, the problem is people spend 99% of their energy on making the website or making the textbook or making the resource, and 1% thinking about, well, who's going to use this, how are they going to use it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I was 100% guilty. When he said that, I was like, oh my gosh. I saw my professional life flashing through my eyes, thinking of the websites we'd made, the project repositories we'd made, the books we'd written that were supposed to show somebody what to do. And when I share this story, someone, and one of them is in the room right now, I won't look at him, always says, Ben, we still need websites. So to be clear, I'm not saying we shouldn't make websites, but it's that's just 1% of your energy is the website, and 99% has to be on how are you doing it. And for me, when you think about improvement, what's your clear goal? How much by when? And then how are you going to know the changes in improvement? That to me is getting at break out of this, make a resource, and then magically something will happen and people will know what to do with it. But like, what would it actually take to make that resource actually useful for people? So that's for me what continuous improvement is about.
Let me add a little bit. That's a great description, Ben. And I think the website approach is a great example of the technical definition of how you might approach continuous improvement. But you're really talking about a relational, a cultural, and a social component to this that sometimes gets missed. And I remember distinctly being at the University of Central Florida, who had done an amazing job moving the retention rates of the students who were not from college-going families. And I would talk to the provost, like, what was going on to be such an outlier in your institution? And he pointed me to an example, much like you pointed an example, Ben, which was to a parking lot attendant. They found that kids were getting ticketed at the University of Central Florida. The tickets were then collecting and adding up, and you could no longer enroll for courses. So kids who otherwise would have stayed in the school were leaving the school because they had parking tickets. And the provost, and I'm sure many others, sort of worked with the parking division. And the parking division reasonably understood that their job was to, police the vehicles and parking and raise revenue through those mechanisms.
In my experience, literally nobody has more effective parking enforcement than universities.
It's probably true. And what the provost said was, actually, our job and yours and all of ours is to help kids succeed at this institution. And you play a key role in that. And so if there are ways we can help young people avoid the ticket, start with a warning, sort of figure out how to prevent the problem in the first place, we can all play a role in helping young people graduate from here. So he reframed the organization and the goals in a very personal way and put everyone connected to a larger mission, which I think is part of continuous improvement.
And if I can pick that up, I think that starts to get at the specific question around how improvement benefits deeper learning. I think, what I take from the two stories that Ben and Ash told is like, you need a method for constructing shared meaning. And shared meaning can't be, even if it's coming from a set of values and ideas that I believe in deeply, like deeper learning, shared meaning can't be a highly defined set of normative practices that I hand down as the formal leader of the organization. Like, shared meaning has to be cultivated communally over time. And continuous improvement gives you a set of tools to do that, right? Whether it is a fishbone diagram or a driver diagram or a PDSA cycle or a run chart, it gives you a set of tools, and those tools are not a substitute for judgment, but what they do is they create the conditions within which collective wisdom can emerge. Right? And so you still need that method, and that happens through, right? It happens through experimentation and risk and reflection and renewal, and continuous improvement gives you a set of tools to do that. At the end of the day, organizations, whether you're talking about universities or K-12 schools, or quite frankly, any organization, right? Great schools and great organizations aren't a function of individual brilliance. Right? They're a function of what we hold in common. And that set of tools gives us a path through which sort of individual experimentation and observation and intuition can travel towards shared meaning, shared purpose, and collective action.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now, I want to know.
I want to pick up
Wait.
on this. Can I?
No, please, Ben, go ahead.
Had lost my thought and I'm back.
It's, in this non-hierarchical situation that we're talking about here, he is my boss.
Sorry, Alec. Edward Deming, the improvement guru, famously said, he got mad. He was talking to educators and he got frustrated. And he said, these educators, they have miracle goals and no methods. And so this idea of having a method for how to improve, when I heard that, I just felt like, when I read that Deming said that, I thought, I'm one of these educators who's got miracle goals. I want to have deeper learning outcomes. But what's my method to get at this? I was thinking about my colleague, Adria Steinberg, and she has this joke that when you're writing a grant, the first part of the grant is you say this thing you're going to do at a small scale. And then the end of the grant, you say, and after that, we'll roll it out. And the joke is, by the time you get to the rolling it out phase, the funder will have moved on to a new strategy, so you can just kind of move on with them. But I was thinking about how that has that roll it out kind of vibe is a method that's the method I had. So I was thinking about we had this software program called Alex that was helps kids with math, and so we had it in 2 classrooms happening in the 9th grade. And then we're like, I don't know, what do you think? Like, yeah, that seemed pretty good. So then we rolled it out to the rest of the organization. Guess what? It did not work very well. This was like a terrible management strategy. So you're like, why do you have these terrible strategies? Like, I don't know. I was teaching, and then I was a principal, and then I was an assistant superintendent. I have a doctorate in educational leadership. No one helped me think about how would you roll it out in some way that would actually work. And in the improvement, we're actually getting some methods. Let's get it working in one place. Well, now let's get it working in one place more than once. That's actually a different challenge. Well, now let's get it working in 2 places. How about 4 places, 2 at this school, 2 at another school? Because that's actually a different challenge, getting it to another school. Well, now let's get it in 16 places at 4 different schools. And having some discipline to how you roll it out, I think there's something very key there that I have really appreciated from improvement methodology.
You're anticipating my next question, which is...
I'm pretty good, Alec.
Yeah, it's almost like we prepped for this. Were you a deeper learning person first or a continuous improvement person first? And was there a kind of conversion moment for you? That's over to you, Ben.
Yeah, so I read Ted Sizer when I was 19. That's where although deeper learning was not an idea at that time, or that was not a phrase at least, that idea of going deep and deeper over shallow, that's where I was exposed to those ideas. I remember being 19 and reading Horace's School, and I could only read a couple pages because I got so excited by I had put the book down and just think about. It took me forever to read that book because I was just slowly reading a few pages and getting excited and thinking, this makes so much sense. This would be so great if school was like this. And I was someone who was good at school. I went to school. They gave us lectures. We took a test on Friday. I could remember what the teacher said, so I got good grades. But I also noticed it was not really working for most kids. And so that's partly why Horace's School spoke to me so much. So deeper learning for me came first. And then, we had 200 kids, 12 teachers here at High Tech High, and then we grew to full school and then several schools. And when I started, this was all in the No Child Left Behind era, where we were going to improve by shaming people by posting test scores in the newspaper, which is a wonderful change strategy. I can't see anything that wrong would happen with that plan. And so I was so mad about using data as a way to improve schools. And at the time, we were using norm reference tests. We're all going to raise scores on norm reference tests, which if you know what a norm reference test is, it's normed. It's actually impossible on average to improve the score literally in the way that this actually works. So I guess I got so angry about it. So I was just data is ridiculous. Education doesn't make any sense at all. And then I started reading, because of Tony Breik and Carnegie Foundation colleagues, started reading in healthcare. How do you get hundreds of thousands of healthcare professionals to change their behavior? Well, actually, there's these methods. And because I have no opinion about how to help doctors know to wash their hands thoroughly before they go into surgery, I could kind of hear it in a way that I could not in other contexts. And then I'm thinking to myself, I have a degree in physics. I'm not opposed to data. I was just so mad about raising norm reference test scores and publishing them in the newspaper, and this is our big change idea, that I started saying, this improvement thing could work for me. And meanwhile, here we are now. We have 5 schools. We have 7 schools. We have 9 schools. We're not a huge district, but we are a larger system. And we're not 12 teachers sitting around a conference room table anymore. We're a larger organization. We need to kind of act differently, but we're still trying to operate in this like folksy homespun way of 20 of us in a room, but it's not 20 of us in a room anymore. And we're going to need some more sophisticated methods. So for me, that was what really helped me see the power of improvement and try to think about how we could make use of it in our organization.
Jim and Ash, what about you guys?
Definitely deeper learning first, in terms of like an orientation or an introduction to a powerful set of ideas beyond the sort of generic version you get in your undergraduate program, right, in a teacher training program, right, that had a sharp point of view. That said, Ben referenced Edward Deming, right? Like deeper learning is similar to continuous improvement in that these aren't new ideas. Right? How we articulate and operationalize them have certainly adapted to the realities and the contexts over time, but these aren't new ideas. And so I mentioned Two Rivers Public Charter School earlier. I was just really lucky to be surrounded by an incredible group of colleagues, and that place was a real gift in my life, in my journey. And while we were nowhere near the sophistication of the tools that we're talking about that make up the suite of tools that's inside of continuous improvement, there was a culture there about making sense of data together, about reading together, about trying something new, trying to intertwine both praxis and things that you've read together, and then interrogating what happened afterwards. So while we were nowhere near, a run chart or anything nearly that sophisticated, right? I had, at the same time that I was having an experience with deeper learning, again, that term wasn't around yet, I was having an experience with the way in which an orientation around data and making sense of data actually enhanced our resilience as an organization and as a culture.
I want to pick up on these two things because there is a thread that connects Ben and Jim and me beyond our dated teaching career stories. There is a thread even over and above that. And it's we all taught in schools that were aspirational and deeper learning, sort of the orientation, in a pre-accountability and pre-continuous improvement environment. And so we saw a destination that was really worthy of working towards. And I think we all felt a relational core of schooling, whether it was how teachers and students work together, or students and students, or teachers and teachers. And all of that was fighting against a system that was not designed for it. So when continuous improvement sort of came to be, it was a bit of a lightning bolt because I remember I was at the School Redesign Network at Stanford, and we were trying to support small schools across the country and study them. And a business school professor there named Huggy Rao had just produced a case on IHI. And the case, which many of you know and have read many other things, showed how a large, often public bureaucracy like the healthcare system can make dramatic gains. And there was a way of doing it. And I remember sitting with Huggy and the head of SRN at the time, Linda Darling Hammond, and myself saying, how can we do more of this in education? And I think it was really trying to figure out the methods, as you've said, of continuous improvement attached to the aspirational destination of deeper learning. It's actually a very powerful marriage that I think can sits here at this conference in a very special way.
We should bring these two conferences together.
All right. On that note, Ben, Why? I think we've touched on this, but let's get right into it. Why does deeper learning need continuous improvement? If you say read my article, that's unacceptable.
So, I know I have so many different stories I'm thinking of. So, we had a student, Camilla, not her name, at High Tech High Chula Vista, and she was Latina, first gen from a low income family, got good grades, and she was another High Tech High success story. She got into a Cal State University, going directly to a 4-year school, first in her family to go to 4-year college. And over the summer, she got a letter from the school saying, hey, you took the wrong math course in your senior year, so it's no problem. Just come this summer and take a certain course. It'll get you back on track. It's $2,000. And what I wish had happened is she'd come to the school and said, what's this weird letter I got? And then we would have said, wait, you didn't, we could have sorted it out, but she didn't. And so she thought to herself, well, I don't have $2,000. That's okay, I'll just go to community college, do my general education courses, and I can transfer 2 years later. And what she didn't know is that her odds of graduating from a 4-year school just got cut by a factor of 6. Because starting in a remedial math courses at a community college is just the data shows something like 10% of students are ever going to even pass a college level math class, let alone get an associate's degree, let alone transfer to a 4-year, let alone end up graduating from a 4-year college. So the data is really stark. And the thing is, she didn't take the wrong math course senior year in high school. There was a mix-up between what we had written in our transcript and how the admissions office had interpreted that transcript. And when I heard about this in the fall, it was like so devastating. Here we are, we've got this school, we're trying to do things differently, the kids are building robots and they're making documentary films and they're trying to do authentic assessment. It's like this rich work. It's like your whole career can be on just trying to figure out how to do this well. And yet at the end of the day, the way we labeled the course on the transcript, and I would like to blame the college more than us, but nonetheless, somewhere between us, there was a mix-up. And it's like, what are we doing here? We're putting all this energy into trying to enact deeper learning, and if we don't pay attention to the stupid thing about what's the course name, it's like we're undermining everything we're doing. And so for me, for all of us who are working in schools or we're trying to have more deeper learning experiences for more kids more often, I think we have to attend to Camilla and her transcript and what are the little details and there's like 100 examples, 1 million examples of these little things that are getting in the way. And to me, continuous improvement can really help us see the problem, see the system, dig deep, get into it, and then figure out what to do. So that's one reason I would give.
I think there's a window of an opportunity that's open now that can create great things by bringing continuous improvement together with deeper learning. I mentioned the state and district interest in these portraits of a graduate that sort of, at least at a high level, put deeper learning front and center in where we would like to develop young people. So that's there. There's also movement to rethink the Carnegie unit. The Carnegie Foundation is trying to say, are minutes really the coin of the realm in education? How do we make school more than an accumulation of minutes? How can we unlock the potential of schools in ways we haven't before? The Fremont High School principal who talked about the great gains at her high school and who's led those gains, that school was organized in a way that tried to change the students' learning experience. So we talked, Rydell mentioned whether you're student-centered versus what's the student learning experience. Well, at Fremont, they opened up the aperture of schooling, so it wasn't just changing the school, it was connecting the school to the broader community. media academies, law and justice academy, architecture and engineering. It was giving kids a set of learning experiences that could actually develop the deeper learning skills that have eluded us to date. So there are a set of rich opportunities that are happening now, and there's a big push, whether it's career-connected learning in the way that Fremont High School represents, or civic-based learning and groups that are trying to give kids opportunities to work with local government, to work with community-based organizations, a chance to sort of change the design of schooling in a fundamental way. Now, that movement, I think it has a much greater likelihood of success if we can connect it to a method like continuous improvement that can keep an eye on an aim, build processes and social agreements about how are we making progress towards that aim, and hopefully move the needle in a way that actually transforms the school system that, as we know, has been remarkably resistant to change.
I'll pick up Asha's last comment, but go in the opposite direction of why improvement benefits from deeper learning.
That was my next question for you, Jim. So just
unbelievable.
Incredible.
My wife is a physician. Specifically, she's a cardiologist. It is not uncommon, right, for her to see a patient that whatever is struggling with high blood pressure or is a heart condition of some sort, and the request is, you know, what's the treatment? What's the pill? What's the surgery? What's the thing? Right? And obviously, particularly in healthcare, there's an importance to that, right? There's a need for that. And in a story that I am guessing all of you have heard before, there are essentially sort of two responses that happen there, right? There's, you get the statin, right, that helps improve your blood pressure. And then you go back to smoking and drinking and, right, having, right, steak for 3 meals a day, right? And then there is the version of that story where a person actually makes some really systematic changes about their lifestyle, right? And their diet, their exercise, how they manage stress, so on and so forth. So if you think about that example through the lens of organizational learning and the idea of complex adaptive systems, right? The first example where you take the pill and then you go back to doing whatever you were doing before is what we would talk about as first order learning. Right? There's multiple names for it, but in simple terms, it's what we would talk about as first order learning. First order learning, like there are different types of first order learning, but the fundamental thing all those types have in common is that they leave the prevailing system intact. Both deeper learning and continuous improvement have an orientation to transformation, but it's a different orientation. In deeper learning, the need for transformation is an assumption that we argue from, not to. In continuous improvement, it's an assumption that you argue to, not from, right? If we can increment improvement in enough of the systems and enough of the surrounding pieces, eventually what will happen is a transformed system, right? Deeper learning starts with the argument that says, hey, you want these outcomes, you want these sort of relational, adaptable outcomes. Guess what? Our system is fundamentally not designed to consistently produce those outcomes at scale for young people. This has to be about transformation from the start. The challenge with improvement in a system that's not pointed towards transformation is that improvement actually reduces dissonance, right? It is by analogy like turning down the heat on a pot of water, right? You don't get the transformation in water to gas unless the heat stays high. That's the only way it can release the heat. So improvement, if you're operating within a system that's not explicitly having a conversation about the need for transformation, improvement actually reduces the felt pressure to pursue transformation. So there's a way in which improvement absent a paradigm like deeper learning, I wouldn't say it's the only one that could do that, but absent a paradigm like deeper learning actually reifies the prevailing system.
There's a danger of, I think I'm just repeating what you're saying, but there's a danger, we have a system the way it is, and if we make it marginally better, consistently and at scale, it's still marginally better.
It's validation that there's nothing wrong with that system.
I'm just going to add one more thing. I'm not going to preach at you right now, but I'm going to say just one more thing, Jim. I think that's a great point. And it's if continuous improvement doesn't bring in some of the deeper learning beliefs, ideals, goals, then it will undershoot the mark of possibility and opportunity. And actually, the transformation agenda, as you said, is shared. But without one another, it's going to be hard to get to a dramatically better place. And at Hewlett, there's always this push and pull between. We introduced at least the terminology of deeper learning in 2010-ish, and have been supporting those efforts ever since. But there's always a question mark about whether or not, what is the evidence that deeper learning is actually happening and kids are actually learning. And our evidence base, from NCLB into ESSER is largely been literacy and math scores. So there's always this tension of, are you getting at the big things that you care about in deeper learning? But are you actually moving the needle on these things that most everyone sort of recognizes? And you have to do both. You can't leave one behind. You can't leave fundamental measures of knowledge with an orientation to skills. So the continuous improvement approach brings a measurement dimension which is critical for success, I think. And so it's both existing measures, but finding measures that are more meaningful to students, to families, to local communities. One of the biggest pushes for the deeper learning competencies have come from the business community. They're now called durable skills, and it's what employers are asking for. Colleges are referencing the deeper learning skills. So if continuous improvement can help us think about a measurement approach which can demonstrate growth in ways that are legible and credible to outside audiences, the two can really move the needle together in a way that either one alone wouldn't do.
All right, we're now going to We're now going to open this up to questions from the audience. So I'm going to come out, I'm going to come down, and if you got a question, come and ask. Raise your hand.
Kia ora, I'm Claire, out here from Auckland, New Zealand. We have a real focus on spirals of inquiry and teaching as inquiry as a mechanism for both embedding deeper learning and focusing on continuous improvement. One of the things I'm really passionate about is the publishing and sharing of learning and creating those learning ecosystems amongst educators. What's your view around the importance of being public-facing with your learnings if you are focusing on deeper learning and you are focusing on continuous improvement?
I will start. I will just say I think this is an orientation that both approaches share, right, in the deeper learning community, and it is beautifully visible as we navigate this space, right? There's a very real commitment to public work, the public exhibition of student work, the public critique of that work, all those things, and the same thing is true in the improvement community, right? That all of those tools that we were talking about are a way of making thinking and deliberation public and visible so that we can talk about it together as a community. and again, arrive at some sense of shared meaning and purpose together as we interrogate those things.
But in particular, the educator learning, like the public-facing nature of educator. I'm breaking the rules. The importance of actually educators being vulnerable and sharing their learning and failures as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think. Trying to think of a good example. I mean, yes, we have an idea at High Tech High that we call symmetry, which is to say that the pedagogy that we use with the kids should match the pedagogy that we use with the adults, which is like so obvious when you say it, except for, I keep thinking about this 2.5-day workshop I went to with a colleague about differentiation, where they lectured at us for 20 hours. And they said the famous, well, if we had more time, we were going to model this, but instead we'll just tell you about it. And like, how often do we do that? So having kids make their work public, but having adults make their work public, key.
Hi, my name's Sarah Howard. I'm from Chicago. I'm a fan of deeper learning, and I think operationalizing it broadly at scale is really challenging. It requires some flexibility in the learning outcomes we're shooting for that either we don't think Black students are worthy of or deserving of. We need to keep them under control. Or we make it so flexible that bias seeps in, and what we think Black young people are capable of, we like way lower the bar. So how do we make this something that isn't just, specialized for the kids' parents who can advocate for it?
It's a great question, Sarah. And I was 2 weeks ago at the North Kansas City Public Schools. Serves about 20,000 students in the Kansas City area. Very diverse demographically, white, Black, English language learners, whole group of folks. And I was sort of sensitive to this going in. I wanted to see, well, how are they ensuring that all students have equal opportunity in their what they had was college and career academies. And I was very happy to see how much attention they gave to ensuring a balance in their academies, to ensuring that some groups weren't out of those experiences, but were distributed across. What they had was business leadership and entrepreneurship, health and wellness, public service, that this was an issue that was directly on their minds, not something they were sweeping under the rug. And I was really proud of that. And I feel like that needs to be part of the public discourse as well. Back to the first question, that we can have open conversations that we may not have had when tracking was a more accepted set of policies.
I'll just say I don't have any tidy, mystical answer to what is a really difficult question. What I will say is, I think an abiding conviction of the deeper learning community is that people, adults and young people, develop in response to their environments, right? And we have to be incredibly intentional about who we extend the invitation to this type of environment, a place like High Tech High here. And often, at the Deeper Learning Conference or many of the organizations reflected in the audience here, if you attend one of those conferences, right, they have students presenting project-based work of one sort or another. And one of the really common reactions to seeing student presentations, if you saw the fifth graders speak this morning at the Deeper Learning, or this afternoon at the Deeper Learning kickoff, one of the really common reactions is like, oh, wow, what an exceptional young woman. The whole point is they are not exceptional. Literally the whole point of putting a kid on stage is that all kids when it extended this invitation to this environment consistently and rigorously, day by day, year after year, will respond and develop in powerful ways that are predictable. That is hard work. So I don't have a here's the 3-step. That is hard work, but it's not mystical work. Right? It is about the assumption of brilliance, making sure we extend the invitation to everybody, and taking up the work every single day.
So if I can just real quick break all the rules and also give a response as well as moderating. I think I share all those concerns about deeper learning. I don't share them more than I feel them about business as usual. I don't think that the current situation is going to serve underserved students better than trying to do deeper learning at scale.
Hi there, Aaron Anthony at the University of Pittsburgh Institute for Learning. We've heard a lot about how deeper learning and continuous improvement are just mutually synergistic, this virtuous cycle. The title of the session, though, suggests they might be in conflict. It's dichotomous. Are there instances where both are present? We've heard where one is absent is a warning. Are there instances where both are present where they are at tension? And what does that look like?
It's a good push, and I appreciate you holding us to account to the title of our session. I mean, I think the measurement question is a place where I personally feel it as a tension, because a lot of times I want to say a bunch of things that are all in conflict with each other, but if we want kids to collaborate well, communicate their ideas, think critically, and then our primary measures are multiple choice standardized tests, we have an obvious problem. And so I think there's work to be done. And so therefore, like I was saying, I was so skeptical of data in education because of this kind of narrow view about measurement. And yet I feel like then we're like, oh, well, it's hard to measure deeper learning, so therefore measurement's bullshit. And sorry, Alec. And I feel like that's like an insufficient response on our part. Because I think there are ways we can try to get at measurement of things that we do care about. And if we do that, then I think it becomes much easier to apply the tools of continuous improvement. So I experience that as a tension of what are we already measuring? It's easy to get to work on improving. It's not easy, but it's easier to get to work on improving those things. And I think we need to have more sophisticated ways that we're measuring things that we really care about so that we can also likewise work at it, because otherwise I don't really know how we're going to improve across schools, across districts, across states if we don't apply some of these improvement methods. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but that's what I thought about.
Yeah, I think first of all, I appreciate putting the conflict on the table. I think measurement is a classic one. And Hewlett sponsored a portfolio of work called Hard to Measure Skills, right? That we're just trying to get at the deeper learning. And I don't think we were going to convince too many people that the hard to measure skills were more important than literacy and math scores. There's just, again, there's a tension there. And both are important. Both need to move. You don't want one without the other. I don't think anyone would want that. But there's one more thing that I think is important to raise about conflict, and it's about cultural identity. And how do you identify? I think people who identify as committed to deeper learning might not see themselves in the continuous improvement camp, and vice versa. When I think it's more of a both and than an either or. But let me give you an example. When I was at the Carnegie Foundation for Advancement of Teaching, we were trying to promote continuous improvement science, that way of thinking. And we went to some of the largest association of teacher educators. And there, I think they were very kind and respectful about the ideas. But the message was, well, I think continuous improvement is great, but I'm about action research. That's what I do. And not being able to see the synergies or the sort of overlaps and convergence and what can we draw from different disciplines to get to a better place, I think that's hard. So how do we sort of break down some of the cultural barriers or identity issues?
Hi, Peter Harris from Ulster Bosse's in New York. You guys have talked about career academy models and durable skills. And so I'm curious also for your response. When we look at durable skills and understanding who wants them, who needs them, and why, and how they're a part of economic development, workforce development, as well as human development, how should we be learning into or leading into community groups and industry partners and employers to find out what these durable skills are and how they think we ought to be helping people to develop them?
Well, I think that when we talk about the durable skills, there's a dotted line back to the deeper learning competencies. They overlap quite a bit, and Ben named the sort of the classics: the communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, learning how to learn, and the reference that I spoke of and you mentioned to career academies were really our efforts to create learning experiences that are capable of allowing those skills to be developed beyond schools and classrooms. And that can happen in communities and community-based settings, in career-based settings as well. And there are organizations, America Succeeds is a big one, that focuses on naming the durable skills, articulating how they get developed, and promoting measures to get at that. So I think what community or civic learning and career learning does is try to move a set of richer learning experiences from the margin to more of the mainstream. And again, you guys mentioned Jal Mehta and Sarah Fine's book. And I think one of the big points that have stuck with me was that where were kids getting these deeper learning opportunities? They were getting them in extracurriculars. They were getting them in electives. But whether you were in a sort of a rigorous no excuses school, an international baccalaureate school, a comprehensive high school, your academic core, they was largely bereft of those skills. So how are we going to kind of help both create new environments in schools, but leverage the community-based learning settings to build them? I think that's one of the pushes.
I really appreciate that last example, Ash, because I think it gets at how we're not just about incrementalism. And I think the question I have for you guys is a lot of times when attention that I experience being somebody who's a camp, part of both camps, is when we talk about deeper learning, we talk about transformation. Too often, I think when we talk about continuous improvement, we talk about incrementalism. And I think we confuse small steps and small ideas with testing bold ideas on a small scale. So you can not burn a lot of will before spreading something that doesn't work. And I'm curious what you all would say about how we can how can deeper learning provide a path for us to really embrace CI as transformation, not incrementalism, because I think that is helping or is hurting us as people who believe in continuous improvement too.
I mean, I'll just pick up with the comment I was making earlier. I mean, I think this is one of the things that deeper learning offers continuous improvement. It is a way to front load the commentary about transformation, to say, this is the end game, right? So that it doesn't get confused with incrementalism, because this is a room filled with people who are deeply immersed in these two sets of ideas. So if you talk to people in this room, this is not a tension for most of the people in this room. it is a tension when you walk into a random school somewhere in this country and are watching how these ideas get operationalized. Okay. And so I think, deeper learning can provide a way of talking about that end destination that necessitates a starting assumption of the need for transformation in a way that's really important, that doesn't allow us to either dismiss incrementalism or to misinterpret incrementalism as validation of what we were doing before.
Stacy, I'm glad you raised it. I think CI gets a knock. The incrementalism is a critique of continuous improvement. And Jim, I think your idea that you're actually creating a bigger frame to push up against or push forward towards is exactly right. What I would add to that is that the continuous improvement work that has transformed school systems, Sarah Howard's group is one of them. When you move high school graduation rates from 50, 60, 70% in many systems to closer to 80, 90, towards 100%, you are transforming lives, you are transforming communities in ways that are remarkable. I think that the next chapter of the work, the ambition, has to be around deeper learning, because we've gotten what we can out of the systems that we have, and trying to push forward is the right way to go, or we're all going to be in a lot of trouble, I think. So I think you keep pushing on that connection as someone who lives in both camps.
Hi, Nimisha Ganesh from San Francisco and MGT. My question is, I'm curious how you're thinking about AI and specifically the urgency of now in terms of both maybe the potential that it presents, but also the risks in terms of calcifying the system as is. I think a lot about democracy and what, and sort of what is the sort of role of the education sector in helping shape the agenda of what we want students, learners, citizens to be able to do and thrive, and how are you seeing kind of AI, career connected learning, kind of high school transformation sort of relating to each other in this moment?
There's so much there. I helped start High Tech High, and I'm skeptical of technology and education, so I know that's a little paradox. I get very annoyed when I hear people talking about making this AI bot that's going to replace all the teachers. And I just feel like, have you met kids? Like, you think that's going to work? And yet, that's my cranky side, because also, I've been playing around with Claude the last week and a half and like making things that are helping make my life easier and better. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I should keep doing that. And I'm pretty sure kids should learn how to do that too. So there's for me, an unresolved conflict in that. But I will also just add that it's not lost on any of us how many Silicon Valley billionaires send their kids to schools that have no computers. So there's an unresolved conflict around all of this.
My organization also has tech in the name. This has been an endless source of conversation for Ben and I over the many years of our friendship.
Also, no one knows the difference between new tech and high tech.
Yeah, that's right. So that's also. I will say, when New Tech Network began, the conversation about technology was not how do we use technology to do what we're already doing more efficiently. It was a conversation about an economy that was changing in one community, and a recognition that technology was going to be one of the critical tool and skill sets that young people needed to have as a tool for meaning making, as a tool for communication, as a tool for making sense of the world. And so how do we get those tools in the hands of young people early on in their developmental trajectory? And so to the point about like calcification of the system, I think that's all. We have pretty well-worn patterns about how we interact with technological innovation. And the first instinct is to say, how can this make all the stuff I'm already doing much, much easier? And the challenge for us is to say, how does this change what we ought to be doing? How does what technology is doing now shift the way we think about the type of young people we're trying to cultivate in our schools and how we spend our time? I think this is a never-ending thread. We early on our work, we helped schools figure out how to implement one-to-one computer environments. Right. And now we're having a conversation about AI. And again, the challenge is how do they see that technology more through the lens of a readiness issue for young people who will have to make sense of the world through the prism of technology and emerging technologies. And there will be something else we're talking about in 5 years when we sit on this stage again.
Just a quick addition. I think there's a lot in that question. It's a very important question. I appreciate you raising it. Coming out of the pandemic, at a Carnegie, it was an improvement conference that Carnegie hosted. We had about 20 superintendents in the room, and we were returning to school, and we were building a national network around improving the return to school and recovery. And across the board, among those 20 superintendents across the nation, one question came up is the mode of instruction had seemed to have flipped to open up your laptop and do the work on the laptop. All of a sudden, the value proposition of being in school begins to plummet. And I don't think the chronic absenteeism problem we saw is unrelated. So what I think I took away from that moment was, unless there's a relational core to what you're doing, unless there's a chance to build relationships, strong relationships inside of schools that are meaningful to young people, have a sense of belonging and connectedness to their school and their larger community, we're going to be going in the wrong direction. And if AI can be useful in, and I hope it will be, in sort of helping us manage counselor loads, which are atrocious, even student-teacher contacts, which are huge in high schools. How can we take away some of that burden and allow the human connection to be the centerpiece of our schools? That's my hope for AI. I don't know if we'll get there, but we're going to try.
Hi. I wanted to offer a different take on incrementalism for my sister Stacy there, because incrementalism in the presence of continuous improvement, in my mind, is just a transformation on the way, right? And if you think of the story you told about the student who you inadvertently put into a mainstream classroom, no one would have called that a transformational change, right? But the impact of that was purely transformational. And so, to me, in the presence of a system that's rigorously structured to learn its way forward, an incremental improvement is really what you're looking for. You want to stack those MFs until you reach a point where they have transformational impact. And if you don't have it, if you don't have those incremental changes, what are you doing? Right? You're essentially doing cycles for no end, right? Because transformation is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to drop on you like a rock from space. It's going to be the result of long, rigorous, incremental work, and we need the muscle to maintain it over time. And that's the thing we've lacked for a lot of our history in this field: the muscle to see something through. And that's why our teachers are so reform resistant. Because when they say they've seen this before, they have seen this before. And we just didn't stay long enough to be able to see the impact of it. That's just my take.
All right, this will be the last. This is the actual last question.
Thank you. Kimberly from Chicago, Network for College Success. And as I am thinking about movements historically, I'm wondering what you are thinking about in terms of what assumptions have to be true in order for this to work truly, because over time, we've seen in education, we try a thing, we are really back to a new the same problem looked at in a new way. And what must we be willing to sacrifice in order to get the results we know that young people deserve?
That's a good zinger to end on.
I'm going to say a few things. I don't know if it's going to land or well, but for all of, I think, a larger collective critique of what school looks like, what we're teaching for, and how we prepare young people to thrive in the world, there's a lot of gravitational pull to school as is. It's something we know. It's something we went through. It has its own affiliations and connections, whether that's sports or pathways to particular higher ed institutions. There's a lot holding schools together as they are today. Even when we know it might not be the best for the most. And so I think an assumption is, can we have community conversations about what better looks like? And are we willing to move as a community towards that, even if it means taking away some of the structures as they exist today?
I think that's a great spot to wrap it up, and we're quite far over time. So thank you all so much. Ben, Jim, Ash, thank you all so much for this conversation. Can we get a big round of applause for the sound for them? And can we also get a round of applause for the sound guys? They did an awesome job. High Tech High Unboxed is hosted by me, Alec Patton. Our theme music is by Brother Herschel. Huge thanks to Ben Daley, Jim May, and Ash Vasudeva for this conversation. You can find links to learn more about deeper learning and continuous improvement in the show notes. Thanks for listening.